Let me paint you a picture. The year is 1780. We are now 20 years in to what will later be called the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution. Everyone knows something is happening. They're not entirely sure what it is or what the ramifications truly are. Almost everyone, though, is getting it wrong because they're applying the lessons of previous decades and centuries and even millennia to the current trajectory. It's an understandable mistake. Why wouldn't you assume that past patterns that have been holding for generations, why would you assume that they wouldn't work the same way now? We are in a similar moment now with AI. Lots of things are changing. They are in flux. We're not even halfway through that change. We may not even be a quarter or a tenth. One big difference when comparing with the Industrial Revolution is each stage of the Industrial Revolution, because there were at least three, two aptly named. Each stage took at least half a century, probably 80 years. The AI revolutions are not taking nearly that long. Instead of being able to measure them in decades, it's going to be years, likely single-digit years. That's not the only difference. What I see happening a lot is many people, including very well-informed people, assuming that things are going to follow a similar trajectory to what happened in the Industrial Revolution. In some ways, that is going to be the case. Not only is that going to be the case, it's going to be at an accelerated pace. In other ways, it's going to be very, very different. Technically the same, but applied at a different angle, which on a practical level makes it completely different. I'm about to react to a video that popped up on my feed about a week ago, and I thought it was very apt. And I'm going to weave in my own thoughts because this is a great prompt for conversation. So let's give this a shot, shall we?
Hey everyone, today I want to talk about why with AI, philosophy has become an incredibly important subject to study. And I'll even go a bit stronger, maybe why it's the last subject worth studying. And I'll begin with a little story. So I have a friend who's a very accomplished philosopher and computer science. He's been a veteran in the ML world, and he's been studying philosophy academically and on his own for decades as well. He's recently been hired by a company to design its own chatbots. I think you can think about it like that. And you might think, right, he's being hired for his technical expertise, that they're training a model from scratch, that they're doing some fancy architectural thing. At least he's touching the code. But it's actually because, and again, he's like one of the world's leading like ML experts. But he's actually been hired just to take an off-shelf model and to prompt it. So in other words, he was hired for his philosophical expertise, despite how advanced he was on the ML side. And so I want to draw a distinction now between the semantic.
So he brought up a very relevant case in point of this guy who is super duper technically capable, also has a very philosophical brain, okay? At any point in the last century, perhaps longer, that person would have been hired for their technical expertise. The philosophical aspect would have been nice at dinner parties, but their job would have been the technical aspect, 100%. bringing forward a case in point, an example like this friend of his. It's not proof that, oh, everyone is already hiring and firing on these bases, you know? It doesn't mean that everyone will or is in that situation. However, when you point out a significant outlier like that, and that's very significant, because this guy isn't even 50-50 technical philosophical. It's all for the soft skills, not the hard. He was hired for his soft AI skills. Normally you think soft skills, you think people skills. Things are changing in a big way. The fact that this guy isn't even part-timing on a technical level is a very big signal.
Semantic world, there's the semantic way with words of engaging with the world, and the numeric way of engaging with the world, right? So the numeric way is on the foundation of the hard sciences, engineering, computer science, physics, whereas the semantic way is the foundation of the humanities. This is rhetoric, poetry, and the semantic way, this is my claim of why.
His semantic versus numeric, I would phrase it as, hard versus soft. I'm not saying that he's wrong, just like that is how it gels in my brain better. But are you doing math, science, engineering? Or are you like philosophizing? Are you psychologizing? Are you figuring out how to provide AI incentives? Are you communicating with AI, or are you programming AI? And this is the shift that we are just seeing the tip of the emergence happening. This is the tip of the iceberg. There's an enormous amount under the surface that will not be exposed to us until months, in some cases years from now, but it is coming.
Of why philosophy is going to become so important is it's going to become so much more powerful of a way to engage with the world, because for the first time in human history, I think the way that we best manipulate technology is the semantic way through these LLMs, and no longer the numeric way, or at least there's going to be a relative shift in power.
AI allows a new user interface for reality. Up until this point, the most powerful, most reliably powerful interface between humans and reality was the numeric, was the hard skills. There are so many parallels with how the Industrial Revolution at each of its stages removed the necessity for humans and for horses and other creatures to leverage muscle power and instead mechanical, electrical power, rather than having to strain their own backs. Now there's machines, now there's robots. We are transitioning through the birth pangs of a new era where we no longer need to do the heavy intellectual lifting. So that's how things are the same. Like muscles, brains, both have become, muscles have become commoditized through machines. Brains are in the process. Intelligence is in the process of becoming commoditized, and not just any intelligence. Very high intelligence. 130, 140, 200 IQ intelligence. We're not at 200 IQ yet, but give it a little bit.
And I'll just give you an example, another example of this kind of Copernican shift in the 18th century. So Rousseau was writing his first discourses, and there was one paragraph where he was critiquing the hard sciences. So the first discourse is his critique about arts and the sciences. And Rousseau says, what will we lose if philosophers never figured out how gravity works between bodies? What will we lose if philosophers never figured out how beetles are mating and how the mind communicates with the body? And Rousseau's point, and he was right at the time, was that the hard sciences were kind of useless. You know, we spent 2,000 years at the point studying how beetles mate, and, you know, all the way from Aristotle and his advances in biology. What has that given us?
I'm going to bust in here because I can imagine the reaction from a lot of people to those statements that he just made. A lot of incredulity, a lot of, what are you talking about? What are the benefits? We have airplanes, we have television, we have the internet, we have AI. Hello. We have so many things. 300 years ago, we had none of those. 300 years ago, technology and the average person's life, how they lived, was far, far, far closer to what the ancient Egyptians experienced than to what we experience today. So we're looking with hindsight bias right now. So when Rousseau said 300 years ago, like, what have the hard sciences done for us? At a practical level, he was completely right. We hadn't yet reached technological escape velocity. We could have reverted at any point in time. The point at when Rousseau was writing that technological point, that could have been the high point for all we know, especially when you were living in the moment. And that is something to keep in mind because we are in a similar moment right now. 300 years ago, I don't believe even the optimists could have predicted where we are today. Something to keep in mind for our current point in time.
And the answer, again, in the 18th century, correctly, was nothing. These things are useless, they're impotent. And it's only been through technology in the last, let's say, 200 years that the numeric world, the hard science way of engaging with the world, has become incredibly powerful. Without understanding gravity, we couldn't have made airplanes, we couldn't have developed our current global communication network. Studying how beetles mate literally has produced non-toxic, superior pesticides, pest control. And of course, studying our relationship between our mind and our body and neural interfaces has literally made the blind see and the crippled walk, right? So it's Old Testament, like biblically miraculous stuff. And my claim is that the same kind of shift is going to happen for those who are masters of the semantic mode of engaging with the world. So the semantic, the humanities way of engaging with the world, has always been powerful because it's given people control over the human world, right? And this is the easiest to see in rhetoric. And this is why, by the way, before, let's say, the 18th century, and you thought about what an elite education was. Today, that's STEM, right? The best minds go into STEM. But for the longest time, it was in the humanities. I think partially because of this kind of power. It's starting to rain very heavily.
I'm going to take this moment to point out that there's a very appropriate metaphor between computer programming and, we'll call it reality. Computer programming didn't exist, of course, until there were computers. Makes sense? Once that happened, first, the only way to speak with computers was in binary. Zeros and ones, nothing else. Machine code. Over time, you get another layer of abstraction, another layer, until you get to eventually C++. Another layer of abstraction. Don't know why I can't say that word. another layer, until eventually we get to JavaScript, Python, things that serious programmers kind of scoff at. But they're very powerful, including, it's a very apt comparison of C++ and Python. Serious programmers like to point out that Python is inefficient. And all of these libraries, they're convenient for people to use and plug in, and they're able to do amazing things in just one function call, but that's so inefficient, and it's not as powerful as if you did it in C++. However, over time, guess what happened? Those libraries became more efficient. They became closer and closer to C++. You'll never get Python to technically be as elegant as C++, but you'll get close. You'll never get C++ to be as powerful as machine code, but you can get close. And the added power of the extra modularity, the usability, the understandability, just the ability to leverage that power in real life scenarios. That is why Python became, for many, the programming language of choice. Okay, so that's a metaphor. Now we go to reality, okay? Until the scientific revolution, and then later the industrial revolution, like the scientific revolution made it technically possible to speak on these numeric terms that this guy is talking about. Wasn't really practical, or it wasn't really showing practical results for typical people until the Industrial Revolution. So that's kind of like going from machine code to like so whatever the first programming languages that were super basic, Fortran maybe. But then, you progress up and up and up through abstraction, until eventually you get to the point where just human language, just talking to AI, now that gives you the most bang for your buck. That is where the space for getting leverage on AI is happening. Let me take one quick break to plug my course that's coming up. Oops, a preview. So Mindshift Mechanics is all about this. It's all about setting your feet right for the future that is practically here already. It helps you determine which hyped technology you should pay attention and which you can ignore. Spoiler alert, for most people, almost all of the hype you can usually ignore. So the whole idea is filtering out 95% of what's coming at you and then figuring out what that 5% should be that you should focus on. It's also figuring out, in a world where intelligence is a commodity, okay, so your raw IQ, even if you're super smart, so everyone else has access to that now. How do you stand out? With unique knowledge and unique application of that unique knowledge. That's a short story. This will help you do that. I'll go more into that later in the video. How do you do both of those? You filter out the right things, filter out the wrong things, filter in the right things. And how do you ensure that you have unique insights that you can apply uniquely? One of the things you need to do is know yourself. And then you have to know yourself in relation to this new macro environment, which means you also need to understand the environment that you're operating in. This course helps you with those three things as well. So it all comes together. And I'm not just operating on the conceptual level, on the philosophical level. I instruct you on that level because you need to know that. And that is the most flexible where if you understand that at that level, you can apply that to literally anything in any way. But I also give you practical examples of how to use these things. I give you a pantry of ingredients that you can then pull out and make your own meals. I don't know if this metaphor is landing, but I give you a bunch of tools. And I'll be building one big example and several small examples for you. And all of this you take home with you. And if you're familiar with Tana, that's where I'll be doing most of the examples. Whenever possible, I'll be building in Tana. And even if you're not using Tana, you'll have access to the prompts and everything that the agents are using and how they're set up. And you can translate that to your own N8N flow. You can translate that to your own space that you're using, leveraging OpenAI or Claude and Cursor or whatever. You translate all those things that I'll be handing over to you. And again, if you are using Tana, then they're already there for you to just use and kind of plug into your system, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why in my product GIGA Brain, I have a special place where you can hook in your own agents, because you can take the agents from this course and plug them in to GIGA Brain very easily. Get GIGA Brain also. It's a game changer. But tomorrow, I'll be hosting an event talking about Mindshift mechanics. That is the course that is coming up. It's starting a week from this coming Monday. I'll be setting the schedule by sending out a survey to people, students who are taking the course. That will determine when we're meeting so that I can maximize how many people can make it to as many of the lessons as possible. Having said all that, let's get back to the video and react some more.
Now, my claim is that with AI, with LLMs, our ability to manipulate it will, as the example of my friend goes to show, will come from our semantic powers more so than our numeric powers, or at least the relative weight will change. And of course, I think philosophy is probably one of the best ways to train that semantic power. But this is actually, I think, the minor reason, right? The lesser of the two reasons why philosophy may be so important to study. Because in this case, I'm still painting the power of philosophy instrumentally, right? I'm still treating philosophy as what is called a techne, right? So techne means a craft or an art, and it's about instrumentally getting things done in the material world. But philosophy, I think, also has the power, or rather, it's the only discipline that can give us phronesis. This is what technique is contrasted against, and that means practical wisdom. The things that we need to know to sort of live well. So here's a way to cut it. I couldn't care less, okay, who it is that solves cancer. Whether it's I that solves cancer, whether it's someone else, whether it's an AI that solves cancer. I just need cancer resolved. But there are many things, there are many truths in the world that I need to be the one holding the truths for it to work. So here's an example. How should I relate with my wife? Is my wife, let's say, a mere tool to get offspring? Is she a friend? Is she a business partner? Is she all of these things? Is she my equal? Is she my superior? Is she my inferior? These propositional statements, right, unlike the propositions around the treatment of cancer, I need to be the one who holds it in my soul for me to live a good life, if that makes sense. And because of this, I think your work in philosophy.
This is a very good point. And I think it might be an appropriate analogy to make to say that, so in the Industrial Revolution, like, we worked our muscles out of a job. You know, just brute force, human and animal muscle most of the time, No longer necessary. So there's two aspects to think about that. One is from like a job or getting things done aspect. And that in that aspect, you all that you need muscle wise is just enough muscle to push a button, or maybe you do still have to do some work, but it's just like you push a ladder up against a wall. You're doing some light lifting. And then there's still edge cases where if you're working on an oil rig, there's just some things you're going to have to be really strong for. Okay, so there's all of those things. But for most people, most of the time, most of the places, there's very little you need muscles for from a job perspective. From a health perspective, though, from a personal perspective, even if you never need to use any of your muscles again, you're going to want to use your muscles, because otherwise you're not going to live that long, or your life is not going to be very much fun because you can't even support your own skeletal structure, if you take it to the extreme. Likewise, with your brain and your intelligence, even if hypothetically you didn't need to use your brain for your job in any way, for your own personal life, for your sanity, for your happiness, for your well-being, just survival even, you're going to need to continue thinking a certain amount. Now, here's one difference between the old revolution and the new revolution. With the old revolution, for your job, technically, you don't need almost any muscles today for like most knowledge work, for instance. That's different with your brain. Even though intelligence is being commoditized rapidly. And what it means when something is commoditized is it means that there's no distinction between intelligence A, intelligence B, intelligence. It's a commodity. Doesn't matter what the label is on it, the logo, it's the same, roughly speaking. No, you still need to be thinking. You just need to be thinking differently. There needs to be something valuable to your thought that can't be experienced or received anywhere else. If you can do that, you stand out, you stand a chance at surviving or even thriving in the new world where everyone has access to 200 IQ thinking. But almost no one is doing it uniquely.
Will never be made obsolete by AI, by even AGI. Because what AGI is, right? Another way to say AGI is to say the end of techne, the end of craft. Anything instrumental that you want done in the real world, a computer can do it better. But there are, right? And so we might, loosely split knowledge into these two kinds. Knowledge instrumentally held to get things done in the external world, right? What is the origin of cancer? What is its resolution? And knowledge that is held for its own sake. Knowledge that is held because in order to even be a human being, in order to act and live, you need to hold certain propositions. I make fun of the Stoics a lot, but here I actually think their model of the human soul can be helpful. Where they treat the human soul as a series of rational propositions, and that the point of Stoic philosophy is to correct the propositions that are wrong, right? So for example, you might think pain is an evil, pain is actually not an evil. We don't have to go into all of that. But what I'm trying to say here is that philosophy, at least part of what philosophy addresses, are these foundational claims you need to make a decision on and that you need to hold in order to live a good life. And it's not just instrumental knowledge, okay? And so those are the two reasons why I think philosophy has become more important in the age of AI, and also why it might be the last discipline worth studying, right? Because when AGI comes, again, it's the end of techne. You don't need to study computer science. You don't need to study the chemical engineering. These things can all be done better, but you still need to decide how to treat your friends, how to live life. Yeah, okay, I hope you found that interesting.
Okay, so I found it super interesting, and it aligns perfectly with the direction that I'm going with so many things. Let's flip over to that screen that I unintentionally shared earlier. There we go. Actually, first, GIGA Brain, try it out. Oh, yeah. With any of my digital products, if you ask for a refund and just let me know, how I let you down within 48 hours, you get your refund. With courses, you get to experience the first week. And then if you want a refund within that first week, you get your refund. Just let me know how I messed up, whether it was miscommunication or I just didn't live up to expectations, whatever it is. So this is a 3-week course, for instance. You get to experience 1/3 of the course and still decide I want a refund if you want. So very, very low risk there. All right, but now let's move on to the usability escalator, okay? This is one of the things that I think a lot of people are missing, and they're making decisions as if it's still the 90s, for instance, technologically, the technological progression of things. What do I mean by that? Okay, well, first let me explain the usability escalator. And this is something that I've noticed has become very reliable lately on a much shortened timescale than it used to be. So first, you hear about something on Twitter, YouTube, whatever. It's like, oh, wow, that's cool. This new AI thing. Like agents, for instance, when they first came out 2 years ago, was it? I don't know. Like there was a GitHub repo and people were like, you can have agents do things, but it was not useful actually because they couldn't do anything. They thought they were doing things, but they weren't actually doing anything. And so it was a nice idea. It was a toy. It was cool. But then you get to the useful stage. You can actually do things that are practically useful with that technology. That thing that used to be just a toy. Okay. But it's not usable by the everyday person. Not at all. You have to go to a GitHub repo. You have to, make some calls. You need to install a few things. And if you have any experience being a software developer, especially in today's day and age, it's not that bad. It's pretty easy for someone like you, but for the standard end user, it's not usable for them at all. Then you move to the it's complicated stage. It is usable. People can use it. They can hook up like a nice little N8N structure or a flow or whatever. But like on its own, it's not usable still. It takes effort. You have to think about it. You need to use one or probably multiple technologies, string things together, and then it works. Not out of the box, not perfectly. There's always some things that you need to do to make it a little bit better, to really make it useful for you. But you can, even a standard end user can do it, but it's complicated. Then we get to the stage where it's just usable. It works roughly out of the box, okay? The technology isn't in all of the products everywhere, and there's various degrees of usability, but there's several options that work pretty much out of the box until you get to the final stage where it's not just usable, it's natural. It comes kind of by default in many experiences. Not only does it come by default, it's more powerful than ever, and it's easier to use than ever. It's just almost like breathing at that point. And it's ubiquitous in every piece of technology that it could be applicable for. So I call it the usability escalator because there's a natural force and progression that is pushing technology in that direction. Because where's all the money to be made? Is it to be made in just a handful of people who can use this technology? Like, 1% of the population down here? No, it's when you can get it to 90+% of the population who, at least in theory, could use it. There, you can make money. And so there is an inevitable push to take technology from here to there. And then, especially once you go from not useful to useful, once you get over that hump, then it takes a while to get here. But once you get here, all the companies who are working on it know by that point whether there's a market or not, okay? And if there's a market, there's a market for something like, for this type of thing, okay? So then you have probably dozens of companies working on the same technology, trying to get it as usable as possible. It's an inevitable push up and to the right, in this case, in my drawing. Now, here's the thing. It used to be that each of these little steps, they would take several years for each step. Like some kind of technology that was initially birthed in the 1980s, okay? Each step in the staircase or this escalator, it would take 2 or 3 years. So if you were a guy or gal who is super technical, you could live out in here for a decade, 2 decades, and you would have a more or less, on that timescale, permanent advantage. You would be able to access capabilities that were not available to the standard end user. And this would be like for half of your career, at least. And by the time that particular technology did get to a usable state, there were extra things, new features, and all sorts of other capabilities that were still down here. So if you were a technical-minded person, you always had a niche in this general space. What happens when that timescale collapses? And instead of taking decades to get from not useful to natural, it takes years, it takes months, it takes weeks. We are fast approaching the time where each of these steps takes like a week or two. When you get to that point, if you are trying to operate at the it's complicated or not usable area, you're running a treadmill. To stay in one spot, you're walking a downward treadmill because the escalator just keeps pushing things up. That means that in the extreme, which we're approaching the extreme in time, the extremes are the only places where you don't have to expend a ton of effort to gain the benefits. Because as things get pushed up here, maybe I should start drawing things. Let's do green and filled in. These things accumulate. What are these things? They're benefits. And they're benefits that other people haven't collected. Because where else are they going to go? They get to the top and that's it. And if you're here and you grab these before anyone else can, good for you. That's an arbitrage opportunity. Now, typically, there hasn't been a ton of these things in the past. Why? Because it took decades, at least years, to get from the bottom to the top of the escalator. And during that time, these things would get picked off at various points along the way. Someone would take this thing here, someone would take this thing here, and that thing there. And by the time it gets to the top, there's one thing that hasn't been picked off yet. And good luck if you think you're going to be the one who gets to that one. But when things go too fast for people to be able to catch these things on the way up, then they start piling up at the top here. And so you get a weird situation, weird to us because we're not used to this. We're not used to technology operating this way. You get a weird situation where you just, most of the time, you just kind of have to sit up here and wait for the technology to come to you. We're not quite at that stage yet, but that is where we're going. We're getting close. At the other end, there's a lot of possible opportunities for finding things that people aren't paying any attention to yet because they're either not useful or people haven't even discovered that it's possible to do even a toy example of something, you know? And you're not even on the escalator, so you don't need to do any treadmilling. You don't waste a lot of energy just to stay in the same spot. You're just standing here digging around looking for things, okay? So these are the two Nash equilibria in a world where technology progresses in usability as fast as, not even humanly possible, as fast as is technically possible. With AI running 24/7 and humans around the world collaborating with AI. One of the interesting use cases, and I'm not 100% sure, like I'm not making predictions necessarily, but okay, let's just dive into it. IDEs today, like Cursor, Windsurf, blah, blah, blah. Who are they serving? And what is the experience? They're serving kind of two masters at the same time, okay? Let's make this hollow so we can see through them, okay? On the one hand, they're doing things that are still complicated. Like you can vibe code, you can make a lot of progress, you can make a simple app, but you always, often very quickly, you get to a point where it's like, I don't know how to make this multiplayer capable, or it's not doing the boilerplate right. And if you know how to do like authentication, if you are a software developer who you understand all of the technical details needed for security and all these other things, or having a very feature-rich product. Like most of the examples, they're not super feature-rich. They do one or a few things really well. But, once you get beyond that, vibe coding only takes you so far. That's when it becomes very, very difficult still. Okay? You're operating in this territory. But before you even get to that, yeah, vibe coding, it's very usable. I wouldn't call it natural though, but it's very usable. Okay? So you go back and forth between usable, I don't need to look at any code whatsoever, I'm just talking to the AI, it's building things for me. And then, bam, you hit a wall. And if you're not technical at all, it's possible to resolve some or even all of these things, but it's not easy. You have to go back and forth with the AI, or you are technical, you understand those things, and it may not be too difficult for you, but it's not like a very usable thing to do. All right, so I don't think that this is sustainable. I don't think that these companies can effectively do this and this is their company and this is their offering and this is where they will be forever. I think they'll have to choose. Each one is going to have to choose, am I going this way and people never have to look at the code ever? Or am I going this way and just maximizing the power. It's going to be useful. So yeah, like basically software engineers are going to love me because I give them all of the AI capabilities, and they can be vibe coding 90% of the time, 95, 99 even. But that 1 to 5%, yeah, they got to go into the code. And we're going to have things to make it very useful for software engineers to go into the code and make it even easier for them. But for 80% of the population, they're never going to feel comfortable using code. And when you think about the usability escalator, the whole reason for the escalator's existence is mass appeal, mass markets. Some builders of IDEs will probably go this route. I think it'll be more tempting to go this route. Here's the thing though. The essence of what they are as a product, as a company, as the people who are in the company, as their vision of what they were originally intending to build, does not align with this. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. I imagine most of them will not survive. They will end up staying here and trying to do both of these and failing and dying. There will be a few who go this way, and they'll be very probably like enterprise focused. It'll be a very interesting business model, to say the least. There will be some successes, but it'll be interesting. This one, I just don't know if they can do it. And if they do it, there'll be something completely different. It won't be vibe coding. It'll be manipulating objects. It'll be communicating via just plain language. And there will be the substrate that users are operating on top of will be so robust that they don't ever need to go to the code level. And they'll be able to build fantastic experiences that we can't even imagine today. The IDEs is just one use case. I think we're in a moment where we're having trouble conceiving of building products and experiences in ways that don't rely on an IDE. But I think that will be the future, the real future. Vibe coding will not be a thing. Vibe coding will be done by the 5% of developers who survive. But this won't be vibe coding. This will be something else. Okay, let's move on over here. What is this line here for? That is the IQ distribution. And right here in the middle, right, that's 100. That's hypothetically the average. And let's do the little bell curve here. Ooh, that's ugly. Okay, but good enough. Good enough. All right. Why did I do that? Because in order to compete in a world where IQ is commoditized, where anyone has access to 150, 200, I don't know how high, like when you get to super intelligence, do the numbers even matter? I don't know. But I just say like 200 to make it really high. Let's call it 300, 400 IQ. I don't know what it would be, but whatever AI has as an IQ, it's going to be like, way up here. Let's do pink for like, this is AI's IQ. Okay. Everyone has access. Everyone has access to that. No matter where you're at on this curve, you're going to have access to 300 IQ. Let's call it 360 IQ because it's, yeah? Okay. In order to properly leverage this though, like if you're down here, it's not going to be super useful for you, unfortunately. I'm sorry. There's a certain threshold you need to cross And that threshold is going to be something like that, okay? So approximately average or higher. And just above this threshold, for every IQ point, for the first several IQ points, you're getting advantages, yeah. But then there's diminishing returns, okay? And that level of diminishing returns, yeah, that's probably right around here, okay? After that, it doesn't matter so much if you're smarter than everyone else. Let me say that again. If your IQ is like right here, your advantage over the person with this IQ, based solely on your intelligence, is marginal. Because they're past this threshold. It's possible for them to leverage this just as well as you can. It gets even more interesting in two ways, okay? First, now this is a theory that I have, so I don't know 100% for sure, but I believe that for the first time in human history, you can truly have an effective IQ that is not what you otherwise would have had because of AI, both in how you can learn better than ever with the assistance of AI that's properly aligned, trained, and when you have the proper mindset, but also when you're using AI, if you're able to use it in the right way. What's the difference between this guy and that guy using AI if you're using it well? I don't know. Some difference, I'm sure. But what that means, if I'm right about that, then this guy who's right here, if he's leveraging AI in a good way, a positive way, for learning, for adapting, for progressing, and in how he's using AI, then even if his IQ is right here, maybe his effective IQ, his practical IQ, that's like right here, okay? Now that may not look like much, but like we're saying this is 316 IQ, so like that's a huge jump actually. Okay, I don't ignore the numbers. They don't really matter per se. It's more the relative distance. That's one thing. Effective IQ is what I'm calling it. Another thing is, let me draw two boxes here. There's a blue box. Maybe we'll fill that one in. And that blue box, yeah. Whoa. That's not a box. Okay. There we go. Yeah, we'll do that. There's that box. And actually, let's do that. Yeah, right about there. And then we'll do a, oops. Okay, now we'll do a red box. There we go. Okay. These are two different categories of people that I'm separating based on approximate IQ. Not effective IQ, approximate actual IQ. And if you don't like IQ as a measurement, I'm sorry, like substitute whatever you think that is appropriate to determine like a nice generalizable measurement of intelligence. All right. Each of these boxes, the people in these boxes, have distinct strengths and weaknesses. So let's start with the weakness of the blue box, okay? Let's do the heights to kind of represent the approximate like quantity that are in each box. Okay, the blue box. Well, people in this box, their weakness is they're not used to wielding intelligent. Oh, and let's actually, there we go. They're not used to handling intelligence anywhere near this level, the IQ level of AI in the not too distant future. It's a lot like, imagine if you were like an Amazonian tribesman and you're handed an AK-47. There's a good chance that you're either going to accidentally kill yourself because you're looking down the barrel and like, oh, what does this trigger do? You know, who knows what you'll do? Or you'll be like, that might work in my garden. I will hoe my garden with that. You know, you're not sure what it does. The chances that you're going to use it as an expert marksman or something similar without having, at the very least, some tragic accidents, is very, very slim. Okay. I think the metaphor maybe isn't perfect, but it works for this group of people who are not, because you have to think differently, you have to use it differently at those different levels, okay? That's the weakness of this one, okay? Now, here's the strength of this category of intelligence holders. And I'm going to frame it inside the weakness of the red box IQ holders. So the weakness in this group, well, first the strength of the red group. They're used to handling that level of intelligence. You know, there's something around here that even if you're technically nowhere near this level of intelligence, there is some kind of category shift that it's not foreign to you, the way that this intelligence operates, you know? So that's the strength. The weakness of this group is very, very likely to only use this super intelligence in ways that would be expected. Since this group is familiar with using it, they're not going to use it any differently than anyone else in this group anyway. And especially since this group is initially primarily the group that is leveraging AI early on, initially all of the benefits are going to this group because they're the only ones truly benefiting from it. But over time, that will change. Because the weakness of this group is it's more difficult. If you are an expert at anything, you know, it can be very difficult to think outside the box. It can be very difficult for this group to think outside of this box. This blue group, they live outside of this box. That's the only way that they think. If this group just becomes comfortable and can successfully wield that intelligence, they have a huge advantage. And the weakness, the red group weakness becomes a double weakness actually, because when you have a certain level of intelligence, there tends to also be an accompanying level of hubris. You might say it's earned hubris. Like, why wouldn't you have that level of hubris? Understandable. But it's less likely that really intelligent humans are going to see this danger coming. That they'll see their intelligence as a weakness. I believe that once intelligence becomes truly commodified, it hasn't yet. It hasn't. On like a kind of a progress meter to like intelligence being commoditized, we're nowhere near it. On a timeline measured in months and years, we're close, if that makes sense. But once intelligence becomes truly commoditized, between the fact of these two, the strengths and weaknesses of this group, and that this group actually has 2 weaknesses to 1 strength, whereas this group has 1 strength to 1 weakness. And add on the fact that this population box, this population box is really like this. And like no one exists way out there, let's be honest. So that's the population box, the sample, compared to really like this population sample. So numbers are on their side. It's not an us versus them kind of thing. That's not what I mean. I mean that the probabilities, even if hypothetically the probability for any individual person in this box, like really nailing AI, like understanding and leveraging it in super powerful ways, even if the probability for any one person is actually still, with all those strengths and weaknesses, much smaller, there's a much larger population base here than there is here. And they have a lot of advantages that I don't think people are taking into account. So it would seem to me, if all of these things are right, that an AI-dominated future is not led by 180 IQ academics and engineers. They're not the ones who get the outsized benefit. It's a portion of this group. It's Gary, the Walmart store manager, who's going to get laid off in 18 months. But he knows how to manage people and systems and when to break or bend certain rules. He knows how to incentivize. He knows how to manage complexity when things go right and when things go wrong at a practical level that few people, regardless of their intelligence, understand. Gary has a lot of advantages in the world that is coming. Okay. How long have I been recording now? Oh my God, over an hour. Okay. Where does that leave us? You know what? A year ago, when I thought about AI and the future of humanity, honestly, what was possible, what was likely, if I was honest with myself, I was pessimistic for so many reasons. And there's still a huge downside risk, especially when you take into consideration complex social realities, geopolitics, all sorts of things. Yeah, there's tremendous downside potential. And I saw all of those things. But despite those things, I was acting optimistic. Not because I was actually optimistic, but because what choice do you have? It's either, well, you're pessimistic and you give up, or you have a certain amount of optimism and you keep going, so at least you have a chance. That's where I was a year ago. Now, I am cautiously optimistic. It's impossible to see the future. You can see possible futures, but you can't know the future. But a year ago, I would say that I just wasn't seeing any bright futures. I was pushing forward anyway, but I wasn't seeing them. I'm seeing some now. That feels good. That feels good.
Just another cargo run through the asteroid belt. Something's wrong with the scanner. Got a funny feeling I felt. Radio's gone static now. Temperatures drop low. Footsteps in the cargo hold. Things I shouldn't know. They're breaking through the airlock. My heart's about to burst. I never signed up for this hell. Oh, this could get worse. They almost got their last bite, but I ain't going down without a fight. Rotten flesh in zero G, floating past my face. 100 sets of dead eyes, moving place to place. Got my back against the wall, teeth snapping at my suit. Never thought I'd die like this, hauling someone's loot. My laser's running empty. These things just won't stay dead. One chance to make it to the bridge. Oh, inside my head. They almost got their last bite, but I ain't going down without a fight. Started up the engines hot, opened up the outer door. Watched them sucked into the void. That's what space